Artificial intelligence is shaking up almost every industry and market faster than most of us can understand. And while predictions for 2024 and beyond only point to this trend continuing, AI is still kind of mystery to most of us. So for those with questions about where it's going and how we can think about AI with more optimism than dread, we look to our Wildcat experts out there for some answers. Joining us today are 4 alums working at the forefront of this new frontier in different and important sectors. This includes Gabriel Flores, an enterprise engineering manager at Latitude AI, whose work with driverless technology is creating change in the automobile landscape. Pratik Mehta, an AI architect at NVIDIA and the previous head of AI at Cloudmedics, a company that uses AI to solve grassroots problems in the medical landscape. And Denzel, a solutions success manager at Adobe Express and Adobe Firefly, one of the major players using AI to drive change in creative services. And joining us today is Chico State computer science professor Abbas Attarwala, whose research on the impact of AI on children provides an additional layer of expertise and perspective as we dive into this giant topic. Hello everyone, welcome to Wildcat Conversations. I am joined today by a squad of alumni who are working at the forefront of artificial intelligence. Heading into today's episode, we ran a couple of audience surveys, and we were asking people just some good general questions about how they feel about AI as a technology, as an emerging technology. And we had over 1,000 respondents, and I thought it was really interesting that just in general. Feeling optimistic was higher than feeling pessimistic. It was 28% feeling optimistic, 23% feeling mostly fearful, and then a mix of both at 47%. I think I got to ask the group just to be super real about it. One of the things we had here is the fear of AI taking over the world. Is that a legitimate fear that anybody has?
I'll start. I would say no, not in the idea of Hollywood robots or anything. No, but where I think we should be cautious though is certainly at least on the creative side, certainly too is one of our emphasis is fighting deep fakes. I mentioned earlier an example of we're in an election year coming up, and again there could be political ramifications if there's falsified images that are being created, or again we have wars going on in this world, and we've already seen examples where images have been generated to create a false narrative about things that are happening. And so again, looking for ways to promote authenticity, to give the proper provenance to an image, to say where and how it was created, and we're seeing a lot of with Adobe leading the way, actually leading the content authenticity initiative, where other companies are leaning in and adopting these models to promote this authentic way of sharing content. So in that regard, again, not quite taking over the world, but it's how something like imagery can really influence the world, and finding that there's appropriate guardrails that should be implemented to protect that.
Amazing, thanks.
Yeah, and I think the way I see it kind of is like the levers you give AI the ability to pull. Like, of course, you don't want it to be, I don't know, in my opinion, I would say like policing and, having it strap an AK-47 to it and let it just run around the streets like that I would say, yes, that would be a thing that everyone would say that's scary. That's a negative aspect of it, but it's about the levers we allow it to pull. And I think specifically what Pratik is pointing to is like, we want it to aid in our decision making. We don't want it to replace us. And that's the goal. If it does replace us, how it's even hard to think of what that means. Like, does that mean it runs the government? Is it a president now? Is it like, obviously those are all terrible reasons to use AI, because it is a model that is influenced by the people that programmed it, that build the models for it. I mean, there is a weight and bias to the whole aspect of how you're generating that AI. Again, it's all about the levers it's pulling. I mean, if it could take over the world if we give it all of the levers to do that. I mean, but I think everyone knows that that's not the goal. And I think I think even initially when the World Wide Web came out, they're like, well, is this okay that people have all this information? Is this a thing that, but AI, the World Wide Web I mean, it helped everybody. It was a transfer of information. It made, highways of knowledge be created between multiple countries, between people who would never see each other in person. And there's this tremendous value it was giving you. And of course, there's people in the different area that try to use these things for negative purposes. But it's our responsibility as a whole to not allow that kind of thing. If you think something unethical is happening, then we have rights against whistleblowing and all these types of things. But again, like I said, it is about the levers you give the AI to pull. And if you give it too much power to do whatever without ever being validated or having some human aspect to it, then that's a bad path. But I don't think anybody currently in this industry wants that in any way. So
exactly. It is going to be a human plus AI combination, right? That's like human driven, AI automated kind of a combination. That's what everybody is striving for. So but as optimistic as I am, I still think that there's reason to be cautious, of course. Like any technology, it can be used for good. It can definitely be used for bad as well. So there are going to be some bad apples and some bad players. So we definitely need everybody to be involved in thinking about the security of AI and thinking about how are we going to leverage this technology for the good and not in a negative way. And the problem with using it in a negative way, which a lot of people fear, is that you will not even see it coming, right? So there are people thinking about AI ethics. There are people doing all the important work, and that's definitely needed. As good a technology can be very devastating very quickly without you knowing it. So you definitely want to, as Gabriel mentioned, keep the levers, keep it very keep it very human at the end of the day. Just I would even say that like you have your own legs, but car gets you farther, right? Same way you have your own mind, AI gets you farther. But where do you want to go? That you have to definitely think for yourself.
You all come to this conversation with areas of specialty that are different from an industry to industry basis. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about some of the misconceptions that each of you face, sort of were in your particular roles.
That fear of new is rightly there, and that's why the mixed feeling, right? But here's my experience from the ground. When I was I've been in this field doing predictive analytics for enough time. Back in 2018, 2020, when I would go into these meetings and I've created this model and I've created some interesting analysis, people would be like, hey, this is great, but we don't trust it. We're going to get an MBA to, actually do this thing for us. We're not going to trust a model to do it. And that was the theme, so 80% or 90% of my effort was, not the technology, was the mindset, that, hey, at least give this a shot. Right. And believe it or not, ChatGPT and the current excitement around this technology has shifted that. Now people come to me saying that, hey, you've been doing AI. Why don't you help me solve this, small problem? Why don't you help me, automate my, Excel worksheet that I'm doing that I have to report? So the mindset is changing, and rightly so, right? Now people have actually experienced it. They have played with it. It's very personal, the technology. If you want to write a good email, ChatGPT can do it. So there is more, more of that. So that mindset is definitely changing. And on the ground, at least what I'm seeing is, so it's very difficult to say what happens in 10 years, 20 years time frame. But right now, what I'm seeing is a lot of small things being automated using AI. So that's just writing maybe better emails, or maybe doing a monotonous task. In my field, for example, healthcare, doctors and nurses, they have to write huge amounts of documentation, review it, and that takes a lot of time. and the time that a doctor or a nurse spends on documentation is time away from actually meeting the patient and doing the important thing that's necessary. So the way I see it is that, in the short term, all of that automation will potentially, hopefully, make for better human connections, right? So the nurses will potentially get more time with the patient. The doctors will actually spend more time, consulting and doing the human element part of it, and not worry about the insurance side of it, the documentation side of it. All of that is where the automation will come in. The quality of care potentially goes up, the cost reduces. So that is, again, initially you will not see that effect, but in the long run, 5 to 10 years, I see a lot of automation happening. And that doesn't mean that the jobs are going away. That just means that there will be better connection. There will be different types of jobs. People will be doing more interesting things, more creative things even.
You're speaking directly to, I think, some of the fears that people were outlining, where it was just a more robotic form of communication. When you talk about AI being a thing to actually supplement human connection, you're speaking right to, I think, things that people are concerned about.
Exactly. I think more so, more so that will happen. All the people fear that, connections will break and will become very robotic. I think the human element starts becoming even more important. With the machines taking over the, mundane tasks, the humans are then freer, or, probably better equipped to actually do the, human connection, the human, that's at least my perspective. In the long run, I hope that that's where the technology moves. That's how people actually use the technology.
Absolutely. To think about like healthcare as a very human-centric profession in itself. Gabriel, I wanted to just shift the conversation to you a little bit. Thinking about misconceptions and being in the driverless vehicle space. What are some of the common misconceptions that you're hearing on the ground?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the misconceptions starts with at least what aids in misconception is the salacious news articles about things like generally AI. It starts with like, oh, this company created an AI model that's exactly like a human. But anybody who's done that kind of thing, it's like, well, like, what do you mean? Like, what is that human doing? Is that human reading a book? Or what exactly is that task? So like, it's a lot of half truths that you see, and so you kind of have to round out people's expectations of what's actually happening there. And I feel like it's kind of like Pratik said before, no one ever talked to me. No one ever brought up AI to me ever. Even when I first started at Argo, when we were Argo, no one ever cared, and there was kind of like, well, like whatever, it's not a big deal. But now people actually ask me about it, and they a lot of times bring up fears that they have or things that they're worried about. And specifically when we talk about vehicles, I know people have fears about you hear about Tesla autopilot and these other things that in the news articles that they're trying to say that it's terrible and it's doing all this negative things to people. But I just don't completely agree with that at all. I think at the end of the day, all of us are trying to approach this as safely as possible. So the biggest thing we try to bring up and let people know is that when we design and build and we're putting together these products for people and bringing them to consumers, we have safety in the forefront of our mind at all times. And that's sort of the key to kind of getting people to not feel or have a fear of AI as a whole. And I think that's sort of what I've seen. And like I said, from the ground side of it, when we were Argo, our focus was L4, which is basically nobody even in the vehicle. That's what Waymo, that's what Cruise, Zoox, I think they're doing that as well. But you see them drive by in San Francisco and there's nobody in the driver's seat. And I know for a lot of people, it gives you a pause. Like you're like, how do I feel about this? But as time goes on, if eventually we can get these numbers to where, these AI models and these systems are driving safer and causing less accidents, and then you don't have people, making dumb mistakes and, drunk driving, whatever. Instead, you just call a vehicle and it becomes part of your daily life. it's going to slowly, reduce those fears that people are having. However, I know Cruise had some more interesting recent things, but that's sort of, it's case by case basis. Each company has their own directives and their own initiatives, and I support all of them. I think we're all like on the same team as it were, because we're trying to make this something safe and something that becomes a part of your daily life. So, like I said, at Argo, we were L4. We were basically going to be doing, vehicles. Possibly, potentially working with large companies to do last mile deliveries, or traveling from state to warehouse, and having all that stuff happen. And definitely, I know people bring up there's fears around that for people losing jobs and things of that nature. But I think exactly what Pratik said is the way we see it, is that it's actually going to unlock more jobs. It's going to be, in my belief, you're going to have more technicians. You're going to have more people that are more like jobs that are substantially, I guess I don't want to say intensive, but require more skills, and sort of almost taking vocational classes to understand what that is. But it is going to change the landscape of when you do leave college, the types of jobs that are going to be out there. And I think it's going to happen in a very exciting way. One last example I'll give is labeling. For us, when you have computer vision, you have to label specific things to kind of be like, that's a stop sign, this is that. And you need people that are constantly validating and reviewing these models for you, so that you always have exactly what it is. Sometimes signs change or things change, and we hope they don't change that much, but sometimes they do. And having human people still be involved with training it, it's like having like a teacher still teaching their students. So, and that AI model is still the students, and the humans are still the teachers. So, I think that's the best way we think about it and try to approach it overall.
Nice, thanks, Gabriel.
Yeah, I have an interesting comment on that. So maybe in 20 years from now, the kids are going to be like, "What? You allowed actual humans to drive their own vehicle? Like, who would give a killing machine in the hands of humans?" So, but yeah, that's the hope that the technology will probably be much safer than we are, or at least aid us to get there.
Yeah, I think I'll add one last piece to that too as well. It's humans have eyesight, which I know Tesla, that's sort of their belief is like, everything should be what a human sees when they drive, and it should react like cameras and all that. But everybody has their own philosophy around it, but ours is sort of around having sensors as well. Like it's like having the person's eyes plus radar, which means like we made little dolphins now that can send out these sonar signals to each other. We use LiDAR, we use all these different systems and sensors now that humans just don't have, and as we refine those and make those better, they work together to provide you, at least our goal is to provide you the most safe solution possible and better than what a human could do. And that's, I think, everyone's goal in this space is to be the safest one possible. So.
Nice. Thanks, everyone. Joseph, you on the creative side, I think that's probably like an area where definitely from like a news standpoint, there's a lot of attention on misuse and things like that. How do you navigate that conversation in terms of like risk and I guess potential for harm?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I really am proud to work for Adobe in this regard because of their position and leadership on this front. First of all, we're trying to create a commercially safe model, meaning that the content that is generated through our solutions, our Firefly solutions, are ones that are created from images that we have the rights to, from our stock library, from things that don't have a trademark or anything. So we feel comfortable going to our customers and believe me, our customers definitely have that concern about, look, I'd love to use this technology and there's a lot of great options out there for using creative imagery that was generated by a AI solution, but they worry about trademark infringements and everything, and rightfully so. In the Adobe's world, of course, we also want to protect the creators too, who came up with these the source images that are feeding our engine and everything too. It's a big part of our business and partnership and everything. And so, yeah, I applaud Adobe's efforts for leading that in the model that we promote. And and the solutions that we can provide our customers as being as safe ones. That too, we also really help with our customers in those who are, as companies are going on this AI journey, is that I think rightfully so, they're coming up with best practices and policies internally, and they'll come to us at Adobe and ask us for inputs on that. And it's great that we're able to help and give some guidance in terms of what we can do, but also do so in a way that protects the creators, that protects the company themselves. And so I think we understand and have ways of mitigating those risks.
Nice, thanks. I'm curious from your standpoint too. You looking at the research, and that from a policy standpoint, and from from the position of looking to provide guidance for the future. What are some of your thoughts around the guardrails and the safety elements with AI? Just speaking directly to sort of the common concerns and some legitimate concerns and some misconceptions.
Yeah, again, it's a great question, Clayton. And so maybe I can add a little bit even from academia and from education sector over here. So I remember back in 2017, 2016, when I was a faculty at Boston University, I would do a lot of live coding in my teaching. So for example, when I'm teaching data structure and algorithm, I would come in with my laptop and we would work on a problem. And as I'm taking feedback from the students, we would come up with a solution. The solution may not work, but it's a great way for students to realize, here's a mistake that I've made here. How do I refactor the mistake and make it actually work? How do I take my code? How do I test it out? Now, remember what would happen in my live coding session is that sometimes I would hit a bug in my code and I would have no idea how to address that issue in my code. And it was, now in hindsight, it was a great opportunity for me for my students to realize that, hey, look, this is what would happen in an idle workforce. When you go and work in an industry, there will be times when you may not be having a solution to the problem they're working on. And what I would do in my classroom is I would, open up, let's say, Stack Overflow, and I would open up Google, and I would kind of put that piece of the bug or the error code on Google and use that information to tell my students, hey, it's okay that when you're writing program, it's going to be a non-linear process. You're not going to be evolving a code right from a clean slate to a perfect state. There's going to be a lot of moving back and forth, until you come to a point where you see the code is reasonably working fine. And so it made my students realize it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to make mistakes, and more importantly, it's okay to have resources like Stack Overflow available. But again, that was back in 2016, 2017. And so now in 2023, ChatGPT has been very, very disruptive. It's something that has just been thrust upon everybody, and everybody's trying to grapple with, how should we be dealing with ChatGPT in academia? And one of the things I've been doing is at least my personal opinion is we should be embracing ChatGPT rather than saying ChatGPT is off limits here. So the way I embrace it in my teaching is, again, when I do a lot of live coding with my students, if I hit a bug, I'm trying to teach my students the ethical and the responsible use of AI, which is, what is the prompt that you're actually feeding to ChatGPT to get the help? It is no different from putting a prompt on Google. So if the prompt is, hey, this is the error code that I'm getting on my C++ program, and I have no idea what it means. Could ChatGPT explain that to me in simple words, what it actually is? And if ChatGPT can do that, explain it in simple words, and my students get the learning from it, what the actual bug is, so that if they were to encounter it again, they know how to address it. For me as an instructor, that's a really win-win situation. And again, my focus here is the ethical and the responsible use of AI. I don't encourage them, hey, here's a problem, let's put a problem in there and ask the solution directly from ChatGPT. No, we should be working on solutions ourselves, but if you hit on an issue, and you have absolutely no idea how to move forward from this, and there are all these cryptic little error messages that show up in your compilation process, that's one way to use ChatGPT in a responsible way. So I think, having a healthy dose is a worthwhile thing to have. But I've also realized, with students right now, with this immense technology of generative AI that has been made available, they have come to a point where they love to experiment with different kinds of prompts. And with the different prompts, they've realized, here's a question on the assignment that typically can yield an actual solution. And I understand there's also this initial excitement factor, which kind of drives the curiosity to experiment more with ChatGPT. But I think at some point, I'm sure students will start to realize that this is not really something that is benefiting them in the long run. If they're locally optimizing for the exam, sure, they might end up at 100, they might end up on 100 on the assignment. But what's the global optimization here? Is it really helping them with their careers? And the answer to that is most likely a no. So I think with the responsible use of AI, ethical use of AI is something that gives a more higher degree of understanding how to use this piece in a responsible way. And I think, it probably might just take a little bit while because a lot of faculties have different ways of addressing it right now. But at some point, I'm sure we're all going to converge on something that is going to be best for our students and for our society. Yeah.
I'd love to hear from each of you just a little bit about the things that you're really excited about.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, again, I do not have an artistic background myself, nor a graphic design background, but yet all of a sudden I have this new technology that can help me, or allows me really to create wonderful, engaging imagery, and think that, again, for today, I might use it for a social media post and things that really is unlocking a whole new realm for me, and that's great. Adobe has this philosophy too of creativity is for everyone, and I think it really taps into that. Is that everyone can be part of the creative process. I look at my daughter, who's 9 years old right now, and again, when she is in a creative mode and she doesn't grab a coloring book, she goes on the computer and she'll generate silly images, with one of these technologies, and it's fascinating to see again her sort of fearlessness when it comes to that, and just how she approaches it. It lends back to even too like why I'm more optimistic about these technologies is I see how she interacts with it, and it will become very ubiquitous for her generation, I think too. So
you were talking a little bit about how there is such a demand for content, that people are creating content at such a rapid pace, not just for school assignments and not just, it kind of blends in with everything that we do. Gabriel, from your standpoint, talking about things that are really exciting, things that you, that I guess like make the work exciting for you personally. What are some of the things that you find?
Something kind of Pratik was sort of mentioning was about algorithms, like original algorithms are slowly being replaced by AI, like our AI models that are responding and doing those things for you. Like your phone right now, fingerprint recognition, facial recognition, that's all using now an AI model that decides, is this who you are? So it's really cool to see. It's kind of, my way I see it, it's kind of like, they're like Pokemon in their first level when they were algorithms, and now they've evolved, and like somebody gave them a Firestone or whatever, and now there's something better. And I it's crazy to see how much is being taken over. And that's why if you ever notice, like a lot of job postings are moving towards a lot of AI driven engineering positions, because they're starting to see that value is actually, it's really useful to have, instead of using this massive algorithm that's this massive project and program, although it is still massive, it is now being replaced by some sort of AI model. So, but from our standpoint, the really exciting thing is, like I said, when we were Argo, we were L4, and it's really only something that large companies would be able to purchase our equipment and our gear. But now being a part of Latitude, moving towards the L3, which is hands-off, eyes-off driver assistance systems, it's incredible because we're basically putting this technology in the hands of consumers that can actually help normal everyday consumers, not just the Amazons or the the Googles of the world. It's actually going to help just a normal person, and in our belief, sort of subscription models and that, to be able to use our models when you want, maybe purchasing a couple months or something like that for a few road trips. Got to see where that's going to end up, but I think it's incredible. It's beautiful to see those types of things be put in the hands of consumers and make their lives substantially better. For me, I'll add one thing is that there's an application of the program. It's called Comma AI. It's basically like a hack version. They call it hack, and not in like mean term, but I mean truly, like it is an Android effectively that is mounted into your vehicle, and as long as you have radar and lane keep assist, you can basically drive on a freeway and be in traffic, and it does all the driving for you. And so slowly seeing that adoption happen through things like those hacked systems, as well as these consumer grade, enterprise large scale systems, is really where I feel like you're seeing the world change. And I had friends who I grew up in a farm area in Salinas, and I hear them using some of the like I think it's Super Drive. It's the like GM's version, or Super Cruise, I think is what they call it. And have some friends using it, and they're like, "Oh, dude, like this is like crazy." Like like they had no idea that this technology is even anywhere near where it's at today. So to see that slow adoption and seeing excitement in other people's faces by using this technology and not being stuck in stop and go traffic, and being able to sort of just relax a little bit more on your daily commute. I mean, it's just it feels like it's already starting to pay dividends for everyone involved. So
Very cool, very cool. I can go next because I have so many things to say, right? So I'm super excited about this technology. Yeah, and I say technology as in the whole landscape, right? We should almost think that this is the 1990s when the internet came out, right? So we're at that stage. So we're just scratching the surface. There's so many interesting applications possible, both for the creatives, both, and we are seeing proof in this room, right? Somebody who is very technical, like professor, somebody who's done English, somebody like me who's been computer science but did data analysis, almost any walk of life can get into this area and make it happen, and that's what we're going to see more and more happen over the next few years or the next decade or so. And the way I see it is, think about it this way, right? That so far, for the past 40 years of computing, we know that computers were very good at doing numbers, right? Doing math. It can do millions of calculations, trillions of calculations per second that humans obviously can never do it. And we use that power to get to where we are today. But now I'm saying that we were able to do that just with the math part of it. Now, for the first time in our life, we have a machine, or we have technology that can understand human language. That can understand any language or any written documentation, and understand as in intrinsically understand the meaning of it to some extent. That's how we are able to have these beautiful conversations, much better than what they were say 10 years back. So with just computation we got till here. Now imagine what we'll get to if we can if these same computers can understand language, if they can understand, if they have computer vision, if they can understand videos, if they can create videos. And so I think we're just scratching the surface. A lot of potential lies ahead of us, and I would say everybody who's listening to this, you're not late. This is starting. So it's a revolution that's happening. Somewhere or the other you're going to find a way to get into this and take it over. So I think there's a lot of interesting applications. And even on the ground, I can speak about healthcare, for example. Yes, in the future, a lot of drug discovery might happen with this technology. A lot of interesting robotic surgery might happen with this technology. But that is for the future. What I believe is today, there are so many, challenges. Something as simple as taking a wrong medication or getting a wrong diagnosis is huge. And it's huge because so many lives are lost by just getting the wrong medication. Can this be solved today? Yes. With the technology that we have today, it's totally doable, right? So there are lots of problems on the ground and in every sector, where because now these machines can understand, you can just take a picture of the medication that you're taking. You can just give a history of, your entire patient, and it will be able to say that, this is the wrong medication or this is the wrong diagnosis, for example. So there's a lot of power to do the simple things today. And now you don't need, teams of, tens of thousands, like what Gabriel was mentioning. You have 3 or 4 good engineers plus business people thinking about technology, and you'll be able to create miracle in short term, in short time, right? So the challenge is this, right? AI plus human, and human as in our skill in almost any field. I would say that if you can create, say, so I'll just give a random example. Let's say if you could create the whole of Facebook from scratch in just 5 days with just 2 engineers, what will you actually create in the future, right? That becomes the goal. So many things that are possible.
We talked a little bit about, like the fear of the fear of jobs being a big sort of discussion point among people. It's a big concern, but you're making a really great case for this being an invitation to welcome people in. So yeah, what are the qualities that make a good AI technologist? I don't know if that's the correct term for everyone's role.
I'll start too. It's just that risk taking comes to mind. I think this is one that, however you look at whatever your role may be, take the risk to challenge the status quo. Again, how can you ask yourself how you can improve the way that you operate? How can you help your company? How can you help society? And by asking those questions, again, there's, to Pratik's point earlier, again, AI should be a tool that can help you get there faster. And that could be something, again, maybe it's communicating an idea or, again, physically getting there from point A to point B. There's endless possibilities, but just that notion of taking risks. Again, there was several risks that I took in my career, from just to get to where I am, and but also in the practical application of, hey, there's the technologies available to my customers, how can I guide them, to improve their processes, to come up with something new and exciting.
That's awesome. Thanks.
And I think, I'll add a bit to that is, I think each person brings their humanity to the application, your opinions, your thoughts, and your feelings. Don't be afraid to post those types of things. And we use Slack, and it's sort of like a company-wide place where people post thoughts and questions at times, and never be afraid to ask or poke or prod. If people are concerned or get mad at you for doing that, then you're probably in the wrong company, and they're probably in the wrong, or there's something's weird, there's something there that you got to detract from a bit. But overall, we bring our humanity to these applications, the ethics that we bring, and we try to be as unbiased as possible in any application that we're using for AI. So yeah, humanity, I'd say, is what a person brings to the AI space.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's very interesting, Gabriel, the way you put it. You just being a human, just being fair, just knowing what is right from wrong. Even if you bring that to the table and keep that in this field of AI, that's very important. But I'll add one more thing. I always say that keep evolving, keep learning, do whatever you like. But I would add this, whichever field you are in, you might be an accountant, you might be an English major, you might be an astronomer. It really doesn't matter. Do the work that you are doing, well, and graduate. Over the years, you kind of build experience. 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the line, regardless of which field you are in. If you've built experience in that field, you can always augment it with newer technology later on. So AI by itself doesn't do anything. AI in healthcare helps to do healthcare better. AI in tax might help to do taxes better, accountants better. So whichever hard skill that you have that you want to get experience on, keep doing it, keep building it, and then try to apply what new technology you can apply to that field. And I'm sure there is a way that AI can be used in almost every application today.
Thanks, Pratik. Abbas, do you have any thoughts about approaching AI from an academic standpoint as well?
Yeah, sure. First of all, Joseph, Gabriel, and Pratik really brought in amazing viewpoints to this question here. But the only thing that I will keep on, my response is going to be some form of an amalgamation of all the three responses here. So I agree that having a human aspect to it is absolutely important now in our present time. And if you just go back to history, for example, there's been all these societal bias and racial bias that were imposed on certain kind of people over history. And I think now we have a time to work with AI where these biases are not getting perpetuated. And these biases to some extent can get minimized. And so when we read these research papers about, the training data, for example, that are being used for building AI models, it's important for us as humans to realize that, if we continue to take our past historical biases and keep on feeding it to an AI model, we're just going to compound these biases for future generations. And, you could be having our children and their children growing up in a world where these biases keep on getting amplified in a very, very loud way. And I'm just worried that we might end up creating these echo chambers where, people are only interested in learning about their own viewpoints and, they would be not willing to look at other person's ideas or viewpoints. So I think, as Pratik, Gabriel, and Joseph mentioned, we're really at a start over here. Let's actually do it right and make sure we do it in a way that benefits our society and benefits us in the long run.
Love that point. Yeah. Well, folks, I want to say a huge thank you to each of you for your time, for your insights, and for hanging out with us. I really appreciate it. It's been great. And thanks to everyone for watching. Until next time, this has been Wildcat Conversations.
Thanks for watching. Join us again soon for another Wildcat Conversation. To keep up with future episodes, subscribe to our YouTube channel and Chico State today. Go Wildcats.